What's going on, ACC fans? Welcome to another edition of ACC Lowdown. As you can see today, we got the Florida State Seminoles on the board. 5-7 FSU, coming off their worst year since the 1975-76 season. Actually, worst 2 years. They've gone 12-13 over the past 2 years. Since Bobby Bowden began his reign at FSU, it's never been that bad. So there's some trouble on the home front for Willie Taggart's crew and Florida State. And it hasn't been easy. And it's been this way now for a few years. Attendance is down. The budget has been cut. And Jimbo Fisher, regardless of what anybody wants to believe, he threw this thing into utter chaos. Last year, took off, went to Texas A&M. The year before that, and the year before that, he was in communications with LSU to try to become the coach there. Made the boosters build him an indoor practice facility, which really wasn't needed. He did say, once I get to FSU, I can win you a championship. Once you promote me to head coach, because they had him in coach in waiting, I will bring you titles. He didn't lie. He did. He brought them championships. But it came at a cost. And now Willie Taggart comes in, a man who does things the right way. A lot of you Florida State fans don't like him. I don't know why. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and this guy totally demolished your program. You're going to need to give this guy some time to build this program up. But you won't, because you're Florida State and you're entitled. And what you're going to do is you're going to fire him if you have a 6-6 or another 5-7 year. But answer me this, Florida State fan. Who's out there? Who you going to go get? You going to run off to Florida Atlantic or Florida International, grab one of those guys? It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, as you can see, we've laid it out. We'll check that out in a minute. See how they're going to do. As far as points per game goes, well, before we jump right into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're really starting to catch a little bit of steam here. A buddy of mine bought me this whiteboard, so I'm not doing it on poster boards anymore. We're catching a lot of steam, like I said. We're still getting through this gauntlet. Next week, check out my Twitter page, ACC Lowdown. I'll put a little poll up. Y'all tell me who you want me to cover next. I'll have 2 teams available. And we'll go from there. Like I said, it does not have to be an ACC team. You just tell me who you want me to cover, and I'll research it for a week, and we'll go from there. So let's start here. Points for and points against. FSU had 263 points against 378. That's not bad, but it's not good either. We've already covered some teams who had a very terrible run on the defensive side of things. FSU wasn't awful defensively this past season. They weren't great, but they certainly weren't too terribly bad. We'll get into where FSU was absolutely awful at. We'll get to there in a minute. One of the most confusing things about FSU, and Taggart isn't 100% innocent in all this. I like the guy. I think he's changing the culture. I think he's bringing in kids with character. You know, we oftentimes see these Florida schools go out there and get whoever they want, and not too high quality character kids. The most confusing thing about last year was the Blackman. He only played 3 games. FSU decided to go with DeAndre Francois, who experienced a lot of trouble in the offseason. Almost got popped by an FBI raid for weed. Luckily, there was nothing there because the local police ended up screwing it up. That's a story for another day, and we won't do a video on that. But in Blackman's 3 games, he threw 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, completed 64.7% of his passes. In my opinion, he should be the starter this coming season, but he won't be, because Alex Hornibrook from Wisconsin has transferred to Florida State and does not fit this system whatsoever. And I'll get into that. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into why that is now. The offensive coordinator for FSU is Kendall Briles. He's a good offensive coordinator. He's been at Houston. He runs the veer and shoot. To sum it up, the veer and shoot is basically you pop a play every time. Every time you get to the line, they're averaging a play every 10 to 15 seconds. That was a lot of Florida State's problems last year, is a pro-style offensive line trying to run this hurry-up offense. It just doesn't work with 325-pound offensive linemen compared to 270 offensive linemen who have enough stamina to get back to the line and do all this. Excuse me. The defensive coordinator is Harlan Barnett. He was the co-defensive coordinator at Michigan State University. He brings a lot of character to the defensive side of the ball. Florida State will not struggle defensively this year. The only problem is they do have to run through quite a gauntlet. Not only do they have some they have a tough out of conference game, but they're in the Atlantic, and the Atlantic's where it's at in the ACC. Let's get to what made Florida State the worst team, in my opinion, in the ACC last year for the talent they had. The offensive line play. Guys, Florida State ranked 130th out of 130 teams in every major category for offensive line play. They were the worst in the country. The worst. Not second worst, not third, not worse than the ACC, even though they were. Worst in the nation, behind Rice in offensive line play. How did they fix that? Well, they really hit the recruiting trail hard this year, and they brought in Randy Clements. Now, Randy has been with Kendall Briles for 10 years now. He's followed him everywhere he's gone. They inherited a great offensive line coach when they hired Kendall Briles, so we'll see how this goes. He was at Baylor for 8 years. He produced 16 all-conference offensive linemen and 5 all-American offensive linemen. So if there's any glimmer of hope for Florida State fans, that's it. The problem is your offensive line is going to be very young this year. And we're going to jump into that now with talking about recruiting. And Florida State had one of the best recruiting years of anybody in the nation. They finished 19th in the country and second in the ACC, only behind the Clemson Tigers, which that's where you want to be, because anytime you finish behind the defending national champions, you're starting to really gain some steam. Let's talk about the first recruit. He's an offensive guard, a 4-star, Dante Lucas. He's 9th in his position as a guard. That's really going to help them. He will play right away. They brought in 3 offensive tackles, Jay Williams, Darius Washington, and Ira Henry. All 3 of those guys are 3-stars. One's 8th at his position, one's 38, and one's 75th. Top 100 offensive linemen, get them in the system, have them start learning everything, and everything's going to be just fine. They did have a transfer, Ryan Roberts from Northern Iowa, at offensive tackle. He can play right away. He's been cleared by the NCAA. But the biggest blow to FSU, just when they got excited, when everything was looking up for their offensive line, one of the best offensive linemen in the country, Landon Dickerson, has transferred. That is really going to set them back. He was the glue on a terrible offensive line last year, but he got hurt. And now he's transferring. He cannot keep up with the speed that Taggart likes to go with. I looked at the weights of all these guys. They seem to fall into that 275 to 300 range, right where Willie Taggart likes his offensive linemen. So they should be just fine there. Sacks allowed. They allowed 3.2 sacks per game. And yes, that's worth it. That's worst in the country. Nothing was more evident into how bad this offensive line play was going to be when I watched them play Virginia Tech the first game of the year last year. And all us Hokie fans were going, we might be one of the best teams in the country. Unfortunately, after a loss to Old Dominion, we realized Florida State was just really, really bad. So with that being said, we've broke down the numbers. Let's get into Florida State football. Let's look at this schedule. Let's see where they go from here. The first game of the year is against Boise State in Jacksonville. So Boise State's going to have to travel all the way across the country for a neutral game. And I'm going to give Florida State a win here. Like I said, I actually really like Willie Taggart, and I want him to do well. So we're going to give Boise State the W there. You know what? Let's try a different color. That color's not showing up too good. Next game, they come home to play Louisiana Monroe. This is a win. Louisiana Monroe has been bad for many, many years now. It's going to be no surprise when Florida State wins that. Next on the schedule, they take to the road for their first game, their first true road game, which by having this game against Boise State, what helps Florida State out here is they only have 5 true road games. That's big anytime. This is basically a home game. You're playing a few miles up the road in Jacksonville, so Florida State essentially got 7 home games. They're definitely going to outlast the Boise crowd. Virginia on the road. We're going to get to Virginia soon enough. Virginia looks to be, as much as I hate to say it, a solid football team this year. They bring back a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. This is going to be a loss for Florida State right here. Let's color these up some, guys. Make these look easy for you guys to read. Next on the list is Louisville. We've talked about Louisville already. If you haven't seen it, check out my previous videos. Louisville was the first one we did. Scott Stattersfield is turning this team in the right direction, but just not quite yet. So this is going to be a win for Florida State. So then, 2 home games in a row. NC State. NC State is one of the teams I'm going to list as one of our coverage teams for next week. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't know a lot about this NC State team. I know they had a pretty decent year last year. I think they ended up winning, I think they won 8 or 9 games. I'm not 100% sure. I have to look it up. So this is more so a gut call for me. Man, I don't know. You know what? We're going to go ahead. We're going to give Florida State a loss here. From what I've gathered over the past couple of years, I think NC State is moving the right direction. So we're at the halfway point, well, almost at the halfway point of the year, before we go into a pretty severe gauntlet for Florida State. And right now, they're 3-2. So Florida State's going to start off the year pretty strong, but can they finish it that way? Believe it or not, I went back and forth on this game against Clemson. I don't think Clemson is going to have another undefeated season. They've lost a lot on the defensive line. They've lost a lot in the defensive backfield. They're obviously not going undefeated. The thing is finding that one, maybe two games that they're going to end up losing this year. But for now, considering this is at Clemson, and I was looking for that Taggart signature win, I do have one, but it's not going to be this one. Clemson's going to pull out the win here. It's going to be close. It's going to be closer than whatever the over-under is, whatever the spread is on the game. It's going to be closer than that. But Florida State gets a loss here against Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. Next up is Wake. We've already previewed this. If you haven't seen that, I suggest checking it out. The Wake Forest video is one of my favorite videos. A team that I really didn't follow last year and a team that I think is on the rise. I gave Wake Forest the win in this game. So this is another loss for Florida State. Now, a team that I've been talking about, and if y'all have seen my videos, we've covered 2 Atlantic teams so far. And every time I get to the Syracuse Orangemen, I'm going, you guys just wait till we get to this video. And I'm going to say it again. You guys just wait till we get to this video. This team is on fire right here. So this is going to be another loss. This is another home game. Forgot to mention that Wake was away. So they're going to come back home against Syracuse, but they're going to lose again. Syracuse is just a powerful offensive and defensive team. So We're at 3-5 for the Noles, and we're entering the back stretch of the season. We've got one gimme game, and we got three games that are not going to be easy. 2 out of the 3 teams look like they could be ranked, but they're staying at home against Miami. Going to try to cut this, 4-game losing streak, and they're going to do it. They're going to beat the Hurricanes. Miami is a utter disaster right now. We'll talk about them soon enough. Mark Richt leaving. Nobody really understanding why or what's happening. He said family time. It was his alma mater. A lot of weird stuff happening down there in South Beach. Away at Boston College, here's the other team that I'm going to offer to preview next week. Like I said, just hit up my Twitter at ACC_lowdown and vote for me. Tell me which one you want. I'm going to give Florida State a win here. On the road against BC. Rounding out senior day, coming back to Florida State is against Alabama State, Division II school, not that great. Actually, I don't think they're D2 anymore. This is going to be a win for Florida State. Obviously, more firepower, better players, better recruits, better coaching. Okay, so going into rivalry weekend against Florida. Let's see where you're at, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, not bad. A game above last year, 6-5 so far. So the Florida Gators, one of the best teams last year. Guys, I was actually at the Florida-Michigan Peach Bowl this past season in Georgia. And I'm going to tell you, when we got to the stadium and we walked out there, Florida kids were just bigger than the Michigan kids. They were just bigger. They looked meaner. They just looked better. But here's the thing. Florida State will walk into the swamp and will beat the Florida Gators. Hopefully I get some cred from you FSU fans for giving y'all this win right here. So we round out the year. Round out the year with Florida State winning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 and 5. Florida State Seminoles. I think it sounds great. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video. We have many more coming. Y'all have a great day.